It is Tuesday morning, and I thought today we would discuss fun things like how I actually am using my studio. Yeah. The idea that there's Midi to CV, and I'm using multiple channels to control everything everybody sees. And I was going to give everybody like a quick breakdown of what's actually happening in the studio, right? So I hope everybody's doing well. I've been studying a lot, and that's been taking me a little bit outside of my scope of doing the stream, and I figured I needed some, more information. I've been watching some people's streams and trying to figure out good things to talk about. And today was just kind of this idea that Midi to CV exists, right? And it's sometimes really alluding to people how this Midi to CV world works and how, Midi works in general, right? And in the studio today, the setup is very simple, where I run a clock out of Ableton Live, and then I run it into this setup right here in front of you, the two black boxes and the little keyboard here, the XY. So the Digitac and Digitone seem to be where all the MIDI lands first, meaning the clock. And then the clock from the computer just helps me kind of direct everything so everybody's on the same page. Now, I can go to a blank pattern, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So everything's going to turn blank in a second. And the thing that I was writing on the XY, I just rename it real quick because I'm going to change a pattern here, and I'll get us something new. Yeah, but writing music lately has been a lot of fun because I've been trying to go outside of the scope of what I normally do. And when I say that, I think it's like trying to surprise yourself is the word, right? So sometimes you keep making the same track. Sometimes you try to surprise yourself. And in the world of what we're working in right now, I'm not going to say that I'm going to try to surprise us per se, but I'm going to try to, like I said, educate everybody on how I think of writing a track, right? So I've taught a lot about chord theory, and I always have a blank piece of paper with me. So if you're following along and you want to elaborate and try to write the song with me, we can do it. And typically, once I have my studio ready, I'll secretly go into the clock inside of this guy, and I will use it as my idea maker. So I'm going to go to 145 right now. I don't know why I've been doing that BPM, but literally I just start with the clock, and I say yes. And then as this is running, I try to get a metronome with the hi-hats. That's basically my main goal, right? So everything right now is muted, and if we're on that track with hi-hat, I will go get a different sample, just because I like making my own hi-hat. Yeah, so there's an open hi-hat from the Lindrum, and then I'll pitch it up. And then I also try to start somewhere in the middle of the sample, so it's a little bit not as harsh. Okay, so that's one of my big secrets, if you're wondering how I actually make a drum sound. So I would take a hi-hat and move a little bit to the off the center. And this is MIDI, so we're just triggering a sample, right? And then another channel, I can do a kick drum. So super easy. And then on the Digitone, I'm going to be sending voltage out of it. So each MIDI channel here is connected to what's the PolyEnd poly, and that converts 8 channels of MIDI to CV. And all the modular you see behind you, yes, I'm obsessed with modular. I have a Buchla, I have a .com, I have some Eurorack. So the idea that these systems all sound very different to me, and that's why I use the power of all the systems. On channel 4, I have the Buchla, which you see right behind me, and if I just literally put a couple notes down, we would actually see the Buchla start triggering. So I'm sending it to channel 4. I'm going to make sure none of them are muted, right? And you can hear the low pass gate. And this is a super simple patch. Like, I'm not doing anything too difficult, right? So I'm going to just go to my kick drum now and make sure that we get a kick pattern. That Vactral sounds like it's got a delay on it, right? So there's our Buchla kind of chirping away, right? Channel 2, I send a clock to the rest of the delays in the system. So channel 2 is simply me sending a clock divider, right? And the note I picked was C. And that's going to be E flat major. So I'm going to write the key out. All right, and the key is written. So here we go. And I'm using a 6 chord right now, which is C minor, as you can see. And that would be C, E flat, G. All right, so those are the notes that I'm kind of thinking of, right? And since that's plucking away on a C, I'm gonna go to my other channel, and I'm gonna make this 4 bars. So I extend the bar now. Okay, so the bar gets extended. And now I'm gonna hit record again. So this is live recording. I know I'm in C minor, right? And I'm gonna just start playing a little bit of a sound. So, and I can start us back off so everybody knows where the 1 is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. All right, and this is literally some creepy stuff. Ready? I'm gonna go open up an envelope generator, and this envelope generator is on a Roland System 100 clone oscillator. So, okay, and there is a delay line, right? And my other secret is I usually write the bass with. Something's a little out of key, right? So we're out of tune. Let me go tune stuff. I'm coming right back. Okay, so. And as we're making the next part, I have another engine loaded over there. Okay, I'm gonna go open up another envelope. Okay, so that's simple, right? Now, I'm controlling 3 voices from the modular. This one I'm just going to clear because it was just me playing around. But now, that is braids through clouds. Okay, so each time I use a sound or make a sound, there is a lot of sound design that goes into each voice that I use. So a lot of people wonder, well, is it really hard to learn synthesis? And I'd say no. But really, you're thinking in like 3 quadrants all the time, or 4 quadrants, right? And the idea that there is a VCO, there's a VCF, there's a VCA, and there's an ADSR. All right, so all my voices kind of function this way, right? Over in the modular. Now, in the Buchla, it's literally 3 steps. You don't even use this because the filter's built into the VCA. And over in any of the other systems, it's always oscillator, filter, VCA, and there's an envelope that plugs in. Now this is voltage, so this is the voltage that I use, and this is audio, so this is all the audio path, right? And after the VCA is typically like a delay line or a reverb, right? So that's why you hear like trails on the sound. Yeah, that's clouds, right? So clouds is like a granular delay reverb. On the other sound, that's the DLD, And that's Tip Top Audio, who makes wonderful effects as well. So there's an out-of-time delay, a delay. That has 3 effects on it. So after the VCA there, it's like delay, reverb, another delay. There's 3 effects. So some of my sounds get kind of crazy over there. That's why I like designing them, right? And anytime you're making something in the modular or in your Digitac, if anybody owns one of these, you know, you have source, which is the sample, you have filter, and then you have amp. And then what's connected at the VCA section at the amp is an envelope generator. So the Digitone's built that way, the Digitac's built that way. Even the OPXY, when I'm in an engine, I have like oscillator, envelope, filter, and then I have like an LFO section. So they have it a little different. Now LFO can sit somewhere outside of here, and so LFO. And in the one patch, basically the LFO is controlling like the pulse width of the sound, and that's what's happening when I make a sound over on that system. So when you're hearing the envelope in this case is actually modulating the VCA or VCF, and then there's the LFO is actually modulating the pulse width of the square. So I secretly have the sound always moving, and that means this width from here to here is adjusting all the time, and it goes from 10% to 90%, and that's my duty cycle in the square waves when I'm making a synth sound in the patch. And MIDI to CV is as easy as like that voltage is now coming from the Digitone, and it's MIDI that comes up and goes to the volt per octave, and you've seen this, right? And that's how I control this voice, is basically the Digitone sends a MIDI signal over to there, and then that MIDI signal becomes the pitch, and it also becomes the gate, what triggers the ADSR. And that's pretty much kind of what's going on anytime you see me stream or you see me playing live, with the exception of, you know, sometimes there's like something completely different going on here, right? I'll elaborate that a little bit later. But that is the overall gist of the setup. So when I hit play, so you can hear it's already getting ready. Right, super simple, right? The other thing is getting the Digitone sound. That's a Digitone, right? And then if I go to the other side of the Digitone, it's MIDI to CV, right? It's pretty simple, right? I mean, it's dead simple. The development now in the drums, right? Meaning pretty much it. I mean, that's the combination of MIDI to CV, and all the clock timing that I'm doing. There are no really big secrets. I'm just playing the C minor chord, and I'm playing the exact scale from C to C again, which the scale that I actually play, if you wanted it written out for you, that whole entire time is literally C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. And this is the 6th mode, which is Aeolian. So if you're wondering, like, in songwriting terms, like, how is my brain working? Even if I played a chord now on the digitone side, I'd actually think, like, you know, like any kind of, like, suspended, you know, sus4, 9 chord, I think of, like, minor 11, you know, these are things that are all just built right into the chord. You just play like any of the notes that are built into there and you count the degree. And that's kind of where I would tell anybody, you know, getting involved with just the smallest amount of music theory, when you layer that into your electronic music, it's like a really smart way that like every sound isn't playing the same thing at the same time. And I had a 2-note chord lesson last time where I was literally sometimes playing just 2 notes. That was the trick. And what I was saying is, instead of playing those 2 notes on the same sound, play one of those notes on this, and then play another one of the notes over here, and then together they make this harmonic, like, handshake, I call it, or glove of, for lack of a better term, chord, right? And it's harmonically made between multiple instruments, instead of you thinking that every chord you make has to be like so complicated and all my hands and I'm gonna have trouble playing it. Yeah, there's another approach that I've been thinking about too, and this is how I make my music. So the other thing that I do a lot of times, instead of thinking of static chords, because sometimes people make music and they think of what's called like static positions. Like I'm gonna have a bar of music. Sorry. And in that bar, I'm gonna have like a chord, and then I'm gonna have another chord, and then I'm gonna have another chord, whatever, you know, and I'm gonna have a last chord, right? Sorry, and that's bar. So somebody would be like, oh yeah, I've seen this before, right? It's like I'm playing 4 different chords, right? That's a E minor, that's a E, G major, A, and that's another E chord, right? So if these were like on the stave, like the musicians are just thinking quadrant-wise, let's play the chord. What I try to do when I make electronic music, and hopefully I'm not giving away too much, but I don't care because I love telling everybody these tricks. So hopefully I am giving away too much. In the first bar, I would say this is my first note, which is E, and then I would play like a melody, blah, 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 whatever. And I would land somewhere, and let's say like that's your next C, right? Instead of thinking like, oh, I've got to play this again in the next bar, like someone who does this, because the next bar is literally like, oh yeah, let's play the same chords over and over again. I would start on F this time, you know, instead of E in the next bar, and my next run would be just shifted, you know, up again, and this would start in F, and then my next bar, as crazy as it sounds, would just become like a whole other note, you know, and this could be like a D note, you know, and then the run starts again, like blah, 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 blah. I'm going to do like a different run. So then instead of me always playing those same chords and making the audience or the listener bored, sometimes in my electronic tunes, each bar is set up more like this, and there's 4 pages, so you got one more page, you know, so it feels a little more like a ride instead of like, oh, I keep hearing this same repetitive thing for 4 bars over and over again until my brain explodes. So people who get stuck in loops are typically playing like this. They're not playing like this. And when you listen to my music and there's the change. And then I went back to the chord, you know. That's why my music sounds like it's going on a journey, and it doesn't sound like it's on some static hinge of like the same loop that's super boring. Okay, so this was like the MIDI to CV, how I use it with the modular, and how I make my loops and send them, and how I make my music sound like it's not some boring loop, it's more of a melodic ride. So I covered a lot of ground today. And I wanted to do that. I wanted today to be such a powerful, impactful, all these things I've been studying online, talking about playing chords and being bored versus playing like an actual fun melodic ride structure has been something that I've been meaning to show everybody, because that's typically how I think of my music. I try to think of it more of a ride instead of some boring loop. And a lot of people have been asking, like, can you show us ways to get out of making loops? I know today I was showing you the routing of my studio with Midi to CV and all my gear, but honestly, this is another big part of what I did today to not make you bored as you listen to the music that I was writing. All right. So hopefully this was like a good primer on how the studio is broken down and a good primer on how to write music without feeling like you're stuck in some kind of loop. Try to play things more melodically. And then if you want harmony, take another instrument and play whatever stack note here with like your lead sound or your keyboard instead of the bass line that's constantly doing that, right? And if you make chords out of different instruments, like voice 1, voice 2 is that note, and this is the bass note. Remember, if you mix up your music like this, when you're writing, it's not going to be so boring because you don't have to sit there and play chords all the time. You're going to use the bass to play the root note. You're going to play voice 2 to play the middle note, and you're going to use voice 1 to play the high note, the top note. You can just round robin that stuff and change every time and see what happens. All right, so today's lesson, again, showing you guys how the studio's set up and how you pretty much see me play live every single night if you see me on stream. I hope everybody's having a good week. It's Tuesday. It is February, is it 11th? And, you know, it's been kind of gloomy where I'm at. I know winter's been cold, but I hope everybody's being productive and writing music and enjoying themselves. Today was just an adventure in talking about literally how I make melodic lines and how I connect all my studio. So I want everybody to kind of get behind my shoulder and see how that was made. And now I'm going to record this song and actually turn it into a track, because that's typically what I do next. When I'm writing with Midi to CV, I can just function mute channels, and muting the channels allows me to take one sound at a time in the DAW, and then I can remix everything. So if anybody's wondering how that process happens, that's going to come up in another stream. I'm going to teach everybody how I siphon sounds out of each device into Ableton. So I'll tackle that next. But big tips for today, make sure you have all your gear MIDI synced in time. If there's anything you're trying to control, you know, MIDI to CV is the way that I prefer it, because then I can make those bigger chains with my voices like I was telling you guys. So I also shared how I make patches, how I do my voices, and this is inside of the Digitac and the Digitone and inside of the OPXY and on the modular. These are how a lot of the patches unfold, where it's like voice, filter, and amp, and then I have an envelope generator usually controlling, and I have an LFO running somewhere. Yeah, that's those are some of the tricks. You know, that's a lot of the routing that I do in the music studio when I'm thinking of making tracks or trying to jam out. So yeah, hopefully that was a cool breakdown of the studio. If you like what you're seeing, like and subscribe. If there's more you want to see or more you want me to tackle, I can always talk about more subject material. But the idea that I was just talking about, how a lot of my voices are run today and how everything is controlled inside the studio, that was kind of like a big point of what I wanted to talk about. Yeah, and hopefully everybody's having a good Tuesday. right, everybody enjoy the day. Thanks for tuning in.